So kia ora everyone and welcome along to what I think is our 13th session for Try This. We've introduced ourselves off before the recording started, so we're going to make a start. Can you all see my slides? I've tried to set it up so that you can see straight away. Can you see those? Fantastic. So I'm going to start with this whakatauki, which I think is familiar to many of us here in Aotearoa. It's so small you probably can't see it. Kamuri. It's that concept of having our eyes on the past as we walk forward into the future, and it's one that I think a lot of schools are drawing on as they explore local history. Would I be right? Is everybody familiar with that whakatauki? Seen it around before? I was talking about it recently to a principal, and all the layers that are there in that whakatauki and all the ways in which we can keep our eyes on the past as we walk into our future. And I was thinking one of the nearest things we've got, one of the layers is that idea that we've got in European culture of, you know, if we don't learn from history, we're going to repeat the mistakes of history or the unfortunate things of history. So that's, I thought I put that up there today because today's key is going to be another one looking at a piece of New Zealand history. So what we're going to be doing today, as always, we'll see if you've got any reflections or stories from things that you've been doing, and then we're going to move on to our key, which is key 13. And yeah, a warm welcome to those who are regulars and to new faces today, and hello to those people who are watching the video later. So does anybody have anything they'd like to share quickly about what they've been doing with the keys, or any stories from the field? Feel free.
Well, I can jump in and say we've been playing with them a little bit in teacher education. So Paige and Kelly and others, we've been introducing them as part of initial teacher education, and we don't get a huge amount of time, but this is the first year we've tried to use this resource as part of it, and I think it's been really great. Kelly or Paige, you might want to even talk to it, but having the exemplars and having New Zealand exemplars and just having those steps I think has been a really gentle, lovely way into this way of working. Do you guys want to say anything about how you found it, or have you tried it out?
Yeah, I'm happy to say. I actually, for my final observation, did the key 6 step into a moment that you modelled to us in class, Priya.
Yay!
And it went super well.
Oh, that's great.
And the students really enjoyed it, and it was fun for me to do as well, and it's given me confidence to try out some others.
Oh, that's so great to hear, because you weren't so sure, right? Because you've got a science background, is that right?
I'm a science background, yep. And it was a really comfortable way for me to step into that kind of idea of dramatic inquiry and creative writing. I hooked it onto that creative writing idea.
Yes, yeah.
That is great to hear, Kaylee. That's so great to hear, because one of the target audiences Tim and I had in mind were beginner teachers who might not necessarily have a whole lot of experience in this. So to know that that worked for you is really rewarding.
It was fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Anybody else have anything to bring? Oh, Nicola, yeah, go for it.
I'm obviously very, very new to this. I just had the PD with you the other week, but I thought I would try as we're starting a new book study, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Neem. And
I love that book. It's a family favorite.
And I found a lovely like hand-drawn picture online of little Timothy sick in bed with his family gathered around him. And anyway, so I thought before I start the book, I'll do what you did. So I just put the picture up on the screen and asked the children what they noticed. And so, you know, they had lots of different things that they thought, and, you know, some thought that he was sick, and others, yeah, all different ideas. And then getting them to just say what each of the little mice were thinking at that point. And then that was quite nice. So as I read the first chapter, there was that anticipation of what's happening and what will happen next. So although that's all I've done, it was a really lovely start to the new book, the book study.
Well done, you. Yeah, start small, those little steps. And the keys just offer these slightly different ways in that just help us change our habits maybe a little bit, don't they? And try something new. Well done. And it's called Try This for a reason, because you just have a little try and see how it goes. Great. Okay, did anybody else want to share anything? Right, well then we'll get started. So we're going to be looking at key 13, and welcome to a few extra people who've jumped in while we were having those conversations. Key 13 is called, she says, checking her book here beside her, Enact a photograph, and it's got some similarities with other keys that we've looked at, and some key differences as well. I'm just going to make sure that we're seeing me. For the recording, just for that point of view. Let me just try that again. Speaker. There we go. So if you just want to mute your microphones, it'll just make sure it doesn't flick to you instead of me when, just so that you're not looking sideways on the video. Great. So key 13. So this is a key that is really useful for using at the start, midway through an inquiry, a way of stopping the action and having a close look at it. And those of you who know drama and dramatic inquiry, I'm going to invite you to think about what's the difference between what we're doing and what we traditionally used to call a freeze frame. Because I think when I was revisiting the key, I was asking myself that question. I was sort of saying, what are the differences here between that and a good old-fashioned freeze frame? And I think there are a few. And Tim, I hope you'll jump in and help us talk about that too. So the way that I'm going to use the example that's from the book, the New Zealand example, and the way that this one was written assumes that the children have a little bit of prior knowledge on the topic in question. And so of course you would have started this topic perhaps with a photograph or some teacher, one of the other teacher keys that uses a bit of teacher in role or something like that. But I'm going to just tell you what the topic is and check our prior knowledge. And the topic is the Springbok tour, which is a topic that I think is local history, but also national history. It's something that really resonated for New Zealand in 1981, didn't it? So what do we already know about this topic? What comes to mind when you think about this topic? Anyone can speak.
Rugby. Muldoon.
The Prime Minister of the time.
I think of Merita Mita and all her documentary work that she did for that tour.
Yeah, there was a lot of recording, a lot of documenting of that tour, and I've forgotten the name of her documentary. If I was at home, I would have all my notes around me. Can you remember what it was? Was it called Patu or?
No.
It was
I
a
can't
one-word
remember
title,
it.
I think, is the one. Yeah, and well worth a watch.
Mm.
Anything else that comes to mind?
Well, people were divided. People were divided in their opinions about whether it should go ahead or whether it shouldn't. That's what I remember.
Were you going to say something similar, Shona?
I was going to say anger. There's a lot of anger.
A lot of anger. And I think it's gone down. I wasn't in the country at the time in 1981, but I came to the country about 10 years later. And then it was still a very sensitive topic to bring up, to talk about. I'm not sure if I'm right, but I feel like a bit of time has gone by, and it's now something that we talk about more. But yeah, it's important for us to know as teachers that this was a topic that really caused a lot of pain and division for a long time in Aotearoa. And the nature of the division, sorry, I'll come back to that slide. The nature of the division was between those for whom, can you see this slide? For those, so Tim, to give you the context, this was a rugby tour in which the South African team came to were invited by New Zealand to have a team to have a test match or a tour of test matches in Aotearoa. And 1981 is remembered as a year when the country was completely divided on this topic. And of course, as with all history, I'm just front loading here a little bit, as with all history, this didn't happen in a vacuum. There was a group called Halt All Racist Tours, led by Tim Minto and others, that they had previously managed to get a tour cancelled in 1973 on the basis, and that one was prohibited by a different prime minister on the basis that the team wasn't selected, the South African team wasn't selected on merit because they did not have black players on their team. They only had white players on their team. And also, there was a lot of unhappiness over the fact, as you can imagine, over the fact that when New Zealand played in South Africa, they were not permitted to include Māori players on the team. Or if they were only allowed to do so by nominating them as nominally white. Just unbelievable to think of that today, isn't it? So I'm just going to read you something that I read from my notes. So on the 12th of September, which was 3 years to the day from the death of Steve Biko, who was beaten to death in South Africa, 3 years to the day was the day that the NZRU invited the team for their second tour. And 1 year later, on the same day, on the 12th of September, there were these violent clashes and on their final test match in New Zealand. So this was the context in which they were invited to the country. And on one side was these people who wrote, this flyer that you see here, just they are not to come. They are not to bring we will not engage with a team that works like this. It's interesting to note when you look at the team, South Africa was including their first ever black player on the team for this tour, but the principle still stood as far as people here in Aotearoa were concerned. And on the other side, of course, there were those who believed that, sport shouldn't be mixed with politics, and people felt very, very strongly on that side. And people said things like, this is our chance to show Springboks how Māori and Pākehā live in beautiful unity here in Aotearoa. So we shouldn't mix the two. And I think genuinely those, trying to use the grace element here, those who supported the tour saw themselves as standing up to violent people who wanted to interrupt sport in a violent way, and they saw themselves as standing up for this and saying, let's not mix that yucky stuff, politics, with sport. So that's the context, and to me it's beautifully summed up in the porphyry that was sorry, I'm just looking for my notes here. Yeah, there was a porphyry for the team in Gisborne, in Taurāwhiti, and the speaker, one of the speakers there was Graham Latimer, who was the New Zealand Māori Council president at the time, and the previous speaker had welcomed the team with some pride and said, Taurāwhiti branch is the only Māori council that actively supports this tour. And then Latimer got up and politely said, you may be being welcomed now, but you will not be welcomed again. We cannot, unless your government can show that it is prepared to change its policies, we cannot welcome you onto any marae in this land. So it was he used, if you go and look at his speech, it was a beautiful speech of welcome, and also this is the last time we will welcome you. And he did an especially warm welcome to Mihi, to Errol Tobias, who was that first player of colour, and he said how much this player represented hope for the 18 million South Africans. So sorry, that's quite a lot of front loading, but I just thought it was probably quite important that we all kind of had that and I think you would do some teaching with the children to kind of get them to for this key to work. It depends on a little bit of kind of background knowledge. So is that giving us a sense of it? And one of the features of this tour was that there were incredible photographs taken, incredible photographs. Funnily enough, I was talking to the bottom central photograph there, is a child in, I think she's in Wellington, and she says, "Can we stop being horrible to black people?" And funnily enough, I was talking to someone today who's been in their school archive and found photographs from Anne's Westra of children from the school resisting the tour. And so there's this incredible photographic legacy. And as you can see, it got incredibly violent. Like things got incredibly violent. The police got incredibly violent. Sorry, I did make notes, but I haven't necessarily brought everything with me. But I think just about every police officer in the country was activated to be part of standing up to, trying to make sure that these events went ahead. And if you do look at the documentary that Priya mentioned, it's just steeped in violence and bloodshed. So a horrible, horrible time. At this point, what we invite the children to do is think about the ways that people in 1981 needed to capture images, because there's two parts to this key. There's the history, and then there's also the fact that we're going to imagine ourselves creating photographs of this. And of course, doing that was very different then than it is now, right? If you were taking a photograph in the 1980s, let me put that to you. What did that involve? It seems amazing that we used to do it, doesn't it? Can anybody tell us?
I remember a Kodak disc camera with a very complicated film system that if you exposed it to light at any point, destroyed all the photos. But once you'd taken them on the film, if you managed to not destroy it, then you had to have them developed.
Sure.
Yeah.
I remember those Kodak disc things. They were short-lived because they were a bit flawed, weren't they? But yeah, that notion of film needing to be developed, taken somewhere and developed, so you couldn't see your images until later on. That's a really radical idea to children now.
It just occurs to me it was a very deliberate act.
Sure.
So I had a camera in 1981, and it was a big heavy thing, and to carry it around was a thing that you did. Whereas now everybody's got a camera in their pocket, haven't they? And they can take pictures whenever they like. Whereas back then, if you were going to go to something like this and you were going to take pictures, you would carry a camera with you. And that
Sure.
camera would be a very obvious sign that you were going to be taking pictures. And when you were taking pictures, people would be able to see you doing it.
That's a great point, Tim. Going to take pictures was a thing you did, not a thing you found yourself doing because you happened to see the opportunity. Really different consciousness, right? And can you remember how many photos you'd get to a film?
12 or 24 or 36.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And so
But the
you had to
quality
stop,
ones would be
reload. Yeah, these little lovely discs, these little lovely cassettes, right? And load them on.
And you'd spend a lot of time framing. You'd be very careful because it was expensive as well, wasn't it? So you didn't want to do false ones and things. So you would be careful, and I think that intentional thing, like you say, Tim, as well. There's intention of carrying it around, and then the intention of making sure that it's a photo that you actually, want to take. Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing it's a deliberate act. It's quite technical. There's some expense to it. You take time. You choose your shots, and you're carrying this camera's got some weight. It's got some value. It's probably quite a precious thing as well. I remember what my camera was probably my most expensive item. When I moved out to Aotearoa, I had one that my brother gave me for a wedding present, and it was a real treasure for me. And I think it's also, we're thinking about who took photos. Now, our incredibly large photographic legacy from the Springbok tour is because a lot of the protesters had an artistic side. So they were artists and journalists, but there would have been all sorts of photographs taken at all sorts of points of the tour, wouldn't there? Let's think about that. I mean, many of the photos we see here are taken in the heat of the protest. The clashes, you know, these are almost the iconic images. And there's one up here from a protest march on the top left there. But what else? And what other occasions might photographers and others have captured, and who might have been taking photographs? So I've suggested the protesters might, but who else and where else might they have taken them, do you think?
Well, the police might be taking photographs. Taking photographs to use later to arrest people as evidence.
And I did see, Tim, a photo of some policemen, they were, who had taken a photograph from a sports commentator. So that was interesting. So that they would have taken their own, and they might have sort of, as it were, purloined yeah. So police could have done it. And when would they be likely to take it? Think about the when.
Well, I guess whenever they judge that the law is being broken, or there is a danger that the law might be broken.
Only then?
Maybe if they're wanting to just identify who's involved in big crowds.
Yeah, they might have been snapping shots of crowds gathering. I was thinking that too. Or people's movements who they could identified as being part of the potential, because this had been boiling for a long time. They knew who the figures were, so they might have captured people not even at the protests, right? Who else might be taking photos?
Sports journalists.
Yeah, and their lenses might have stayed on the game, even as things were happening up in the stands. Oh, I wonder if they'd have swung around. They must have been torn, hey, about what they were going to take photos of. Because there'd be a difference between being someone who's taking still photos of the game as their commission and a sports journalist whose job is to get the story, because then you might change, change your perspective then.
I expect there'd be both.
Yeah.
The newspapers would send, I mean, a normal sporting event, they would just send their sports photographers, but for this event, they'd have news photographers there as well.
There's a lot, isn't there? So let me just move the screen forward a little bit. So we've got, as I say, we've got two sides, very clearly two sides here. We've got those who are protesting. Now, I don't think they had any knowledge of how nasty it was going to get, but if you look at the photographs, they did equip themselves. There's one of the kind of iconic things about the these photos is the way people are wearing their motorbike helmets. So that's like a day-to-day item, but you don't put that on if you're not anticipating some kind of violence. There's that side, and then there's the kind of the photo. There are many fewer photos, but there are obviously photos of people resisting the protests as well and standing up for the game. So here's our camera. That's a 1980 Kodak camera. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a moment so I can do something. I'm going to take a copy of. Whoops! Stop. Sorry, not going very well here. Go back. I'm going to see if I can take a copy of the links here and stick them in the chat. Because what I'm going to ask you to do, invite you to do in a moment, is I'm going to invite you to get into a couple of groups. All right, so I'm going to pop you into your breakout spaces in a couple of groups. Someone just left going, oh, don't put me in a group. No, she did say earlier that she couldn't stick around, so that makes total sense. And I'm going to invite you to, we thought about all these photographers, all these different people with these bulky cameras and who they might be and where they might be and when in the tour it might have been. So to be clear, this tour started at, they were welcomed formally in Gisborne, but they went to all different centres, and some games were disrupted, others weren't. So you're going to need to think, I think, for this photo to work, of where, who's in the photo, also who's taking the photo, when it is, and what's going on. So as a group, I wonder if you could have a conversation about those. It's 4 things, isn't it? The where, the who, the when, and the what. Is this a photo? Is the photo that you're going to imagine being taken during the welcome ceremony, maybe in the changing room? Would you take photos in the changing room? They do sometimes. Is it on the pitch? Is it in the stands? Is it during a riot or a piece of protest? And then who's in the photograph? The when will help you with that, I think. And then what are they doing? And obviously, if we were in a classroom, what we'd invite you to do is to form into that photograph. But I'm going to challenge you to see whether, as a group, or even on your separate parts of the screen, you can think about where you might place yourself in the photograph and say, well, I'm beside them and I'm in this kind of a shape. Because I reckon we can do it. I reckon we can come back and you can tell us what your photo looks like and describe it to you. Are you up for that challenge? Okay, what I'm going to do just now is I'm going to pause.
Okay.
Tim, can you just say that again? Because I paused and you said something wonderful and I want you to say it.
So, yeah, can I ask everybody just to think about where the photograph is now? So it was taken in 1981, but where is it now? So where has it ended up?
We didn't put that in the key, but I really love it. Okay, right, I'm pausing again so I can organise you into... Welcome back, everybody. So this is totally a challenge. You spend a little bit of time off in your breakout rooms. Welcome back, welcome back. And you've had a think about a photograph that was taken at some point in the spring. We're going to imagine a photograph that might have been taken at some point in the Springbok tour of 1981. And I've encouraged you to think about the where of that photo, the when, the who, and the what. So we will do some more things with it, but just so that we can kind of get past the strangeness of trying it on the screen, I'm just going to invite everybody here to think about who they might be in the photo that their group was working on, who they might be representing, and just as we know, photographs don't move. They capture a moment in time. They do capture an expression or someone making a movement, and just move into that now as if representing the person in that photograph. If I can count down 3, 2, 1, and by 1 we've got a series of images that might be people in those photos. Let's see how that goes. No need to say anything, no need to move. 3, 2, 1, and there they are. And just relax. Well done. I think that's quite tricky to do that on Zoom because you haven't got the support of your people around you, but something happened. Did you see that, Tim? Something really did. So thank you for giving that a try. So next I'd like to just we're going to use the chat function here, because if we were in the classroom, what we'd do is we'd give out bits of paper. But if you open up the chat on the side, do you know how to do that? Just click chat at the bottom of the page and take a moment to, and it doesn't matter if different people are writing at the same time, take a moment to write down when and where your photograph was taken. This photograph that we're imagining. So we'll see some things start to appear in the chat. When and where your photograph was taken. So we've got one photograph that's taken in someone's home, in a living room. And we've got, this might be the same photograph, I suggest, from a front room of a flat in central Wellington, near the protesters. Right, and I know we've got a second photograph, so Oh, we've got a planned protest or a demonstration. We've got a meeting that's planning a protest that's going to take place outside Parliament, right? Where's your meeting? The meeting that is, so that's the first one, yeah? Looking down out at the window at the protesters. So we've got one that's looking near the protesters, and we've got one that's in a meeting. Am I right? Those are the two examples. Great. The point of this key is to allow the photographs to speak for themselves. So even though it would be much easier now to invite you to explain the photographs that you've created, I'm going to invite you to try and allow the photos to speak for themselves. So the people who are working in the group with the photo looking out through the window, that's your group, isn't it, Priya? Not your group, but you're in that group, right? Could I invite you that when so Shona and Paige, you'll be looking on, and Tim and I will be looking on at this photograph. We're going to invite those who are in that, looking in that photo of a group of people in a flat looking through a window. I'm going to invite them to represent that photograph again. And I think you told me it was in a family album now, wasn't it, Priya? So it's as though we've opened the family album and there the photograph is. And of course, today it's on various parts of a Zoom screen, but I think this will still work. Those of us who are looking into that album and seeing that photograph, let's have a close look and see what we can see. And Priya, if we could invite you to read the descriptions that have been given,
Okay.
and then take up your position. So we'll hear and we'll see. And if you
I'm just wondering if we've made it clear that we've got kind of two things happening in our photos. We've got.
Well, you could do that. You could make that
I'm
clear.
just wondering whether I need
what
to
you read. If it's not clear,
Oh no, I think
what
it
I
is.
don't want you to
Yeah.
do is tell us too much about what's going on.
I know. Yeah. No, that's all good. So I
You
just
want to know where, when, and who, really. Okay.
So am I doing the photo as well?
So
I need.
what I'd like to invite you to do is I'll count 3, 2, 1 again. The others will freeze back into that picture. And if you can hold it for a while for us, and then Priya, if you can read the descriptions that give us and then take up your position as well.
Okay, so I read it first. Okay.
Yeah. And Shona and Paige will be watching on and just see what we see. Just see what we see in these photos. Are we ready? Thanks for giving this a go. Right. 3, 2, 1, and we open that album, and there under the plastic is this photograph with these things, and Priya's going to give us a bit of a description, and then she's going to enter into it too. It's like she's reading what's written underneath the photo in the album. Here we go.
At home, in the living room, during the Wellington game, from a front room in a flat in central Wellington near the protesters. The photo is taken during a protest, taken from the home looking out of the window at the protesters, mum cooking and father and child watching the game on TV.
And now she's going to freeze up as well. Wow. So we're gathering round and we're having a close look at this photograph. Now, if it gets really hard to hold your position, just relax a little bit, shake out, and then go back into it. What's going on here? What can we see? Shona and Paige and Tim?
Well, it doesn't look like they're watching.
Sorry, I'm going to answer. I can see arms raised in just about every. Were you going to say that, Tim?
No. I was gonna say that it looks as though their attention has been drawn away from the game to the protesters. That appears to be, to me, what's going on there. But I might be wrong.
Can you see all the hands raised? There's a fist. There's a flat hand across some eyes. There's another fist. What do you notice, Paige? We'll get you to say something and then we'll allow them to relax. They've been there a long time.
Well, I see a bit of passion coming from Kelly watching the game. So
Which
maybe
one? Which one do you think might be watching the game?
Kelly, is it? Kaylee?
Kaylee, what makes you say she's watching the game?
Oh, just because I can see the screen. She's got a prop.
Screen there in the
But
background.
she's got a, you know, when you watch a rugby game and your teams are gonna
So
score a
maybe
try.
that fist is up there saying what?
Like go All Blacks.
Right. Go, go, go. Please relax, everybody. Gosh, it was incredible how well you held those.
My son just walked into the room. He's like, "What's going on?"
What is going on? Tim, can you help me here? How would you invite those looking on at that photo to reflect on what they're seeing? What questions would you be asking now?
Well, yeah, let's have a think about this. So the thing that we don't get over Zoom is how you are
In relation
with
to
each
each
other.
other.
So
Yeah.
in a photograph, there's a frame, and then the people within the frame, and we can't see the composition. So it's actually quite strange in its way, because it looks like 4 separate photographs taken through a different frame, but you're actually obviously in the same frame, aren't you? So perhaps you could explain to us where you are in the frame. So
that's what I want to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand there are children there. Is that right? Who is it that's representing the children? So Jen is.
So the one with the.
So
Hand over
it's
their face.
my mum is trying to get me off, just trying to get me off watching the protesters outside.
Right. So you're sort of doing this. So don't tell us
I do want to
anymore.
see it.
Don't tell us anymore. Because now that we've got that piece of information, we
Yeah.
can start making sense of that. So can you just put your hand back as you were?
And this bit
So,
let me just jump in, Tim. This bit that Tim is
Yeah.
doing now is probably the important part of the key, is to let this picture talk and to question around what you can see, rather than asking Jen to tell us what she's going for. Is that right, Tim?
Right. So because it's not a photograph, it's people representing a photograph. There is certain pieces of information that we don't have. So Jen, we can see that the piece of information we do have is that, but we didn't know that Jen was a child, and we didn't know that her mum had told her not to watch the protests. So now we're looking at that, we can start to interpret what that means. Now, so Jen, I'll just relax for a moment. So who is it that's representing the mum? Priya. Okay, Priya, when you were standing up, it's another limitation of Zoom, is your head disappeared.
Right. Okay. I thought I was in the frame, sorry.
No, that's fine. So you sort of head disappeared out of the frame, and that's the bit that we need to see.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we know that you're standing up.
Yeah.
So you just, let's see if we can do it with you standing up and seeing.
And where is your daughter? Where is your daughter in relation to where you
on
are?
the side here. So this hand actually went all the way over to Jen's screen.
Right. That's
yeah.
So
is
it's
this
not
your hand? Is this your
it's
hand
not
we're
Jen's.
seeing over her eyes?
That's my hand. Yeah.
I love it.
Now, if you take that changes. Can everybody see how that changes everything?
My own hand versus my mother's
It's not
hand.
Jen putting her hand over her face. It's her mum putting her hand over her child's face.
How does that change things, Shona or Kaylee or Paige? Well, Shona or Paige, I guess. You were the watchers. How does that change things?
Let me think. Yeah, this just becomes a very, like a micro. This is our family, and this is what our family is thinking at this time. And you might be interested in it, but no, this is what women, or this is what Dad and I think, or whatever. And we say no.
Right.
Like a protection.
Right. Yeah.
So a parent, a mother, is covering the eyes of a child. Jen, how old is the child in the photograph? Can we tell?
But 7 or 8, enough,
Right.
Old enough to realize what is going on.
Okay, but okay. So 7 or 8, old enough to know or to have some understanding about what's going on. So the question is, why would a mum attempt to cover her face? You can imagine her saying, can't you? Don't look outside, don't look at that. So what's her motivation for that? Why is she doing that, do you suppose?
I
sounds
wonder
like,
whether it's quite instinctual and in the moment a little bit as well, like kind of going to the window. There's obviously a lot of noise and maybe things are building and it's just more of an instinct to kind of pull the child away from it. Maybe not even consciously, but just kind of like a response. And that's kind of how I felt, maybe.
I don't want
So
my
what's
child in
I'm not
driving
this
sure what's going to
violent
happen,
world.
therefore I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
should be watching this. It just feels like it's getting a little bit out of control down there.
So her default is to protect, like, oh, and then she'll work it out, and then maybe she'll let her see. Yeah. Whereas I felt like what Shona said was more a case of, hey, you might be interested in this, but I'm going to filter this out because this is not suitable for you, which is much more of a conscious thing. So it's going to make a huge difference whether the photo was like the first second that she got to the window or after everybody had been watching for a bit and more of a no kind of. It's a really different thing, isn't it? A really different photo. And I guess that's how the key works. That's kind of the point, right? You've just demonstrated that beautifully for us, Tim. It's the probing questions of what the tiny nuances of the photographer's choices mean, and who took that photo is also really important here, isn't it? And why? Can you imagine a longer conversation? I'm conscious of time. We are going to probably need to, but I think we've got a flavour, haven't we, Tim, of how that key works? I do want to make sure we get a chance to see Shona and Paige's one. We probably won't spend so long with it, but as a beautiful way of showing how the same instruction can result in two completely different responses. Would you like
Viv,
to?
Viv, just before you facilitate that,
Yeah.
can I very quickly, because I think it's important that we
Yes,
include this,
please do.
is that you can see the difference between that and freeze frame.
Oh yes,
So
yes.
in a freeze frame or a still image, you don't go into that kind of depth in terms of who's taking it, where is it being taken, why is it important that it's a photograph, where's the photograph ended up. It's just freeze frame implies just a moment in time, just everybody stops and just freezes for a moment. And it may be in the hands of a teacher who's skilled in this work, it may be that the teacher will say, well, this is a photograph. Let's imagine who's taking this photograph and where these people are and what the occasion is. They may do that, but freeze frame doesn't require you to do that. The freeze frame isn't asking you to do that. Whereas this key is saying explicitly, be aware that it is a photograph and that photographs are taken by people at a time, usually for a purpose, and the photograph is a piece of evidence. It changes the way that you think about the key and think about the way that that piece of drama is created.
And it sounds like a small thing, but it's a big thing because all of our questions came from that. So we didn't even get into the technical things like how many photos into the film do you think this was, or why do you think the photographers with this family instead of down in that? So it just puts so much richer inquiry around it to frame
who's
it
taking
in
the
that way.
photo? Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. It just thinking of it, and if you're going to make something a photo, you have to really think about the camera that made that photo, and there are certain things you can't do with this key. You can't do. We're going to do the invasion of some pre-Christian camp in Roman times or something, because there weren't no photos. It's got to be something else then. It's got to be a drawing or something else. So it's about coherence, isn't it? So why are we freezing? What kind of freeze is this? This is a photograph. Okay, if it's a photograph, who made that photograph? And I do think those powerful questions of who, what, where, and when are the difference here. So
I'm a little bit curious about I won't take time, but just curious a little bit about this idea of looking at the photo now, 25 years later, more than that, 40, 45 years later, bad maths, you know, is the mum in the photo the grandma that's sitting there showing this to the next generation, that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's probably another discussion again, but I'm curious as to how you would.
Well, what do you think are the benefits of having that framed like that?
Having the distance. Well, I think then you've got potential for looking at that moment, don't you, as well? So what's that moment there, and what's that? What has time given us looking back at that event historically with what we know now, and all these questions that you're talking about in terms of differences of photography and what we do now, and about intentionality, and about, you know, the kind of questions that you might ask grandma about that.
Exactly. I think it's delicious for two reasons. And Tim, we didn't actually put that in the key, but I wish we had, the where is it now. I think it's delicious for at least two reasons. One is it makes the group, the children who are doing the work, the students who are doing the work, think of this historical event as linked to now.
Yeah.
It's like, so that happened then, but where is the artifact of that now? So it immediately ties us and connects us. It's a connection frame back to that. And that answer might be straightforward, like it's in a family album, but it might be that it's, I don't know, that it's buried in an archive somewhere and nobody's looked at it for 25 years. It's going to be a comment on our relationship to history. So I think it's delicious for that reason. And secondly, I think it's a delicious offer to then use another key.
Yeah.
Because we could encounter the person who owns that photograph, couldn't we? We could do so many things with it. So it connects us to that, and it also gives it a context in the now, and just you can just see it going off in multiple different directions by that one question. Yeah, history is, it's that looking backwards to move forward. Exactly. Our eyes are on that past and thinking about where it is now. Really nice. I've got that teacher's urge to make sure that both groups get seen, but I'll just check with you, Shona and Paige. Do you feel like showing us your one?
Are you okay with that, Paige?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, great. It's I know it's tough when it's only the two of you, but it's kind of lovely to see how differently people can take the same instruction and go off. So let's invite you to write, and the reason we write it is it keeps it in that descriptive, because if you invite people to start talking, they go, oh yeah, because I'm really like angry with her, and it's like, ooh. So the invitation to write is clever. So if you'd like to use the chat, Shona and Paige, and you can both do it because they both works really well, to just write where your photo is taking place and when. Take your time.
Yes, sorry, I did that before. I thought it was everyone. It was just
That's fine.
but
That's fine. No, I think I probably did say both of you actually, didn't I? So which one was yours, Paige? I did. You followed instructions beautifully the first time. So it's a planned protest or speech, or it. Did you say to me earlier that it's a meeting to plan that? Is that what you said?
No.
No.
It was a Shona. It was like a planned, it had like an organized maybe a rally kind of thing.
Okay.
It was an organized meeting, and we went to attend to sort of see and make some judgments.
I see. And maybe you would like to just write for us who is in your photograph, because it's two people. Just write that for us.
Sorry, Paige, I'm not savvy with this.
That's okay, I can do it.
Can you do the writing?
Thank you.
Pardon.
Thank you. We are putting extra difficulty into it with the using. If you can, you imagine in the classroom giving the children a piece of paper, Shona, and they write between them, and it you know, if there's a child who's not keen on writing or whatever, oh, look at that, did you see what just popped up? I'm not going to read it because someone else is going to read it for us in a moment. So we've got right, is there anything else we should ask you? And what's going on in this photo? Could you just type that for us, Paige?
Yes.
Can you see how this writing keeps people out of interpretation? It kind of works, doesn't it? And I wonder who took this photograph. We'll have a think about that when we see it. Shona, can you tell me where the photo is now? Did you guys talk about that?
We did, and I've got to say, Paige came up with the most. I would never have thought about it for a million years, and I think Paige should be able to say it because I think it's great.
Where is the photo now,
Sorry.
Paige?
I just had the idea because I've been at uni since, well, for the last 5 years. So there's been a lot of kind of protests in that time where they've always encouraged us to go and be a part of it. So I was saying maybe it could be in like the university archive, and like they did it back then, so you should do it now, kind of encourage
Some kind of inspirational piece.
Yeah.
Right. So if those of us who were in the previous photo would like to look on, Paige, could I ask you to do what Priya did before and just read us that description? Don't need to add anything, and then join the picture along with Shona. And Shona, if I can ask you after 3 to just freeze into that shape again. So here we are in the university archive, and we're going to see the picture, and we're going to hear perhaps what's written in the caption, you know, as you wheel the part of the archive open and you open this spread. This is what you see. So 3, 2, 1, there it is. Have a listen.
At a planned protest outside Parliament, 2 university students are attending a demonstration to gain an understanding of the issue around the Springboks tour.
And you freeze into it too.
Oh, interesting.
What do you see? Stay there for us if you can. Yeah, what's interesting, Tim?
Well, look at so
We're
what
reading you,
immediately
so if you can stay frozen, that will really help us read you. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you can get the faces as the people are in the photograph, that would really help. It's hard to hold but if everybody can see the faces now, then
Yeah,
you
have
can,
a look,
if you
burn
can't
it
hold
into your
them,
skull, and then we can
yeah,
let them relax. Yeah.
yeah, then you because it's hard to hold that for
There's
very
another
long.
fist, isn't there? Fists are featuring. Yeah. Okay, and then you can relax. Then you can relax. So don't you talk to us because you're still in the photo really, but we're going to talk about what we saw. What did you see? What did you notice?
Saw some defensive body language a little bit from Paige with the arm across the body, and just really not quite sure what she was looking at or whether she wanted to be involved. That's what it felt like to me.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that amazing?
That just by that simple action, the way that Paige almost was sort of trying to make herself smaller, just by doing that.
And it wasn't just that; it was the turned away face as well.
Yeah,
yeah. That's quite a vulnerable sort of part of the body to you know, protect yourself as well.
So if we just we won't ask Paige until we're finished. But what reasons might there be for somebody to be at a protest like that who doesn't want to be there? Why might she be there?
Looked a little bit like a bit of peer pressure because the other one looked like they might have been a bit more into it.
So you're reminding us,
she...
Priya, that people find themselves at situations that become quite heated, and they sometimes get pulled into it by peers.
Any other things that come to mind?
Yeah, Shona really looked like she was enjoying it, and maybe shouting in protest as well. Definitely had the fist raised in agreement.
So there's one person was shouting and was, like you say, looked like they might be enjoying it, but was fully engaged in the whole process. And then standing behind them or beside them was someone who really looked like they didn't want to be there.
It was like open body language, wasn't it, compared with the closed? So it's just that, yeah. And the leaning in versus the leaning out. Yeah.
Right.
I wonder who might turn their camera onto 2 students on the sidelines at a protest.
Journalist.
Why would they want to do that?
Well, there was a lot in it, wasn't it? You know, you could imagine someone writing exactly, you know, the tensions and the differences and the 2 different perspectives in one frame.
What I love about it is it's almost a third perspective, because we talk about New Zealand being divided, those who are for, those who are against, but we're reminded here that actually people would have also been tugged both ways, unsure, and to become firm you have to have been in that undecided space, at least temporarily. So maybe this journalist kind of quite enjoyed the fact that there was one that wasn't, you know, so firm.
And it reminds you that, like Kaylee was saying, within families, husbands and wives maybe, or within friendships, you can have that difference as well. So yeah, that division.
Could I ask everybody, just for this last bit, just to imagine that we're a committee who have been asked to look through the archive and find photographs from that time. And we've got hundreds of photographs of different kinds, but we've only allowed to select a few to become a part of a display, that just to tell people who come, that what was happening at that time, possibly students who weren't alive and didn't know anything about that history. So do you suppose, as a committee, if we came across this photograph, would this be one that we'd choose to be in the exhibition?
I'd like that.
And if we did, would we need, is there anything that could we just take it out and stick it up on the wall, or would we need to do something else to find before we did that?
I feel like we could. I feel like actually it was taken by a photography student that was with them, rather than a journalist, which is why it's so beautifully framed and that kind of that moment in time capture. And so I feel like it may be, it probably is in quite good condition because it's in an archive, so it can probably just go straight up as is. But maybe we'd need to identify the two people, get the permission.
We would.
We would, wouldn't we? We couldn't just stick it up on the wall. We'd need to go and find these people and get their permission, wouldn't we?
Lucky there's Google AI face recognition.
Thank you, Tim. That's another beautiful question that just shows us how, by framing things in a really coherent way, like if you're gonna have a photo, have a photo. Have people who care about the photo, have people who are handling the photo, and ask questions about them as well as the contents of the photo. And suddenly you've got layers on layers on layers. I think you've just
one last thing, Viv. One last thing. Remember, I said to Paige not to speak while we were talking about her in the photograph.
Yeah.
But now that we've found her, now she's 43 years older.
Yeah. We've got another key, haven't we? We could encounter her. Yeah. Lovely.
Now we can say we saw you in this photograph. We'd like to use it in our exhibition, but we're curious about what you were doing. Why were you there? You looked like you were very reluctant.
And how did it turn out for you?
The opportunity to answer.
Oh, yes. So well, Shona said, in 1981, these days we pay for our own university and it's on our own responsibility if we go to classes or not and stuff like that. But in 1981, it wasn't like that. So maybe there could be repercussions for not being in class but being at a protest. So, or maybe Shona can explain it better.
No. Can I just ask Paige though to this is illustrative. Sorry, it feels like I'm being a bit mean to you, but can you talk as the person in the photograph?
Oh.
So imagine that we're interviewing you 45 years after the event. So how would you say it if we
You're
were
about as old as I am now.
Yeah, we saw you in this photograph. We wondered why you were there. And you seem reluctant.
Yes, well, my friend and I wanted to go to this protest to see what it was all about.
Hold it there. That's perfect. So I just know it's perfect because can everybody see the shift from talking about it to talking as if you were there? And that's what this key can do, is it's got all those layers and flexibility, but you have to treat it as a photograph.
Yeah.
If you don't treat it as a photograph, if you start talking to the people in the photograph, then you lose all of this, all of the fact that it is a photograph, the conventions of a photograph. You know, if we're going to talk to the young lady who was in the picture, the university student, we can't just talk to her. She's in a photograph.
She's in a photo. You don't get to talk to photos. We have to go find her.
I have to go and find her. And of course, it's 45 years later. So she's thinking back.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Tim. And it just says in the key, consider a follow-up activity, and Tim just did that, like, oh, beautifully. So yeah, there's the key, and there's the difference between that and enact a photograph, you know, where or we do different things with different photographs in different keys, and you can see that that one's about letting, you know, it's really an inquiry starter. And you can see that for it to work, the students do need a little bit of background knowledge. So you could be using other keys to build up that background knowledge, or you could introduce it during a traditional inquiry. I think I'd like to conclude by sharing the screen again, because what I found is that after I'd thought about this key and thought about the photos of the time, I became really interested in what real photos of the time then looked like. I don't know if you're the same, but can you imagine doing this key, doing the writing, doing the thing, and then going back and actually looking at photos of the time and how differently we would see them because of that detailed looking we've been doing? So what I'm going to do is I'll share with you later, or invite you to go and look for it yourself on YouTube. There's a 7 Sharp report. 7 Sharp's a TV program here, Tim, where there was an auction of rare photos from the 1981 tour that actually came up quite recently. And I just found myself poring over those photographs and the way they were set up and the personalities and the reasons that the people might have been there. And I would suggest to you that, as well as all the other things that it does, it hones our interest in the genuine documents from the time. And I think if I was to go back and show you photos, you know, the photos that we looked at originally, you sort of looking at them differently because you've been in one. So I would take children on I'd be taking children through a tour of real photos of the time. So in terms of planning for that key, you do need to make sure that you've got a sense of the contexts that might come up in your history. So you can use this in an imagined context, of course, but I think that this is really powerful. Both the examples in the book are about history. You're going to need to know quite a bit about that history. Even though the children are going to generate their own ideas, I think it's really useful for you to have a sense of moments in the story, in the historical occasion, that might be worthy of examination. And it sounds really funny, but you've also got to know what you can't decide to do, like Tim's done in his example, the Titanic, without thinking about what cameras were like at that time, because you're going to be inviting children to think about the technical and artistic methods used. Some things about photography have been true through all time, like how you arrange people, or what makes a photograph interesting, but other things are unique to a particular time. So yeah, and there are different kinds of photography. Like we were talking there about photographs that are taken in the moment, but there are also formal photographs, there are team photographs. And so think about the different kinds of photography that might have arisen in your context. If you think about the Titanic, for example, there would be formal photographs taken, and there would also be sort of informal, and then there'd be ones taken sort of in moments of crisis as well. Ours very much had that sort of protest feel to them. But you're trying to invite the students to think beyond the obvious a little bit, and I hope we did a little bit of that with the Springboks today. So I think we've reflected as we've gone today, but always when you are teaching one of these keys, always at the end, I would encourage you to do critical reflection. What shortcuts did we take? What oversimplifications did we make? Whose stories would have been important at this time that we haven't told? What are the dangers or limitations if we only think of an event through imagery? Just really critique the way you've gone about the learning. because there might be other aspects. I think it's important to acknowledge with the Springbok tour that most of those images, when you do a Google image search, were taken by protesters. So there is an eye on that perspective. And I think one of my observations on the Springbok tour, I don't know what you think, is that New Zealand has retold this story as they look back to move forward. I read an article recently where one of the leading protesters said, it's amazing how many people talk about being there on the day and being there on the lines, and they've all become, and the story has become how New Zealand stood up to racism. And it did not feel like that at the time. So I think it's also really important to share that kind of thing. But on a positive note, it is really beautiful how it was described by anti-apartheid leaders, by Nelson Mandela himself, as when he heard about the invasion of the pitch. I think it was in Hamilton. He describes it in his biography as feeling like the sun coming out. So it did make a difference back in South Africa, and I think it's useful to share that with children too. So thank you for bearing with us. Gosh, we've gone half an hour over time, but so well worth doing. And thank you for the experiments with the practical activity there. We'd love to hear if you used Key 13 or any of the other keys in your teaching. Do share them with us. So there's a link on the website where you can share them with us. And we hope that you'll join us. We've got another session on Key 13 in the morning, New Zealand time, where Tim will be taking us through his example. Otherwise, we'll see you on the 1st of December for Enact a Portrait. I wonder how that's going to be different from embodying a photo. Thank you so much, team. It's been really great tonight. It's a certain risk. Are we going to really make this group of people think about how they're going to be photographed when we're all on Zoom together? But thank you for helping me look at the past as we move into the future. So I'm going to stop the recording there and say thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Next time.